Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are, whenever you are. I hope you are well. Welcome to this episode of CDO Matters Live. I'm your host, Malcolm Hawker. It is, as usual, a Friday. So when we record these, we do this on the last Friday of the month. But obviously, we capture the video, we stick it on the YouTubes, and we stick it all sorts of different places. So it's entirely possible that you're watching this at some other time that is not a Friday. But it's Friday for me. So yay, hip hip hooray. It's noon here Eastern. Good morning if you're on the West Coast, and good evening if you are in Europe and beyond. Maybe you're already imbibing in a lovely adult beverage of your choice. I certainly will be in a few hours. Gluten-free, of course, since I went gluten-free a few years ago, which means that as a beer lover, being the Canadian that I am, means I live in a constant state of disappointment because the gluten-free beer is just like, oh, there's a couple, but I mean, it's just not very good. So usually, well, at least for the last few months, I've been joined by a wing person. Generally, my partner in crime, Mr. Ben Bourgeois, who is our content director here at Profisee, but he is on PTO today, and I'm not. So you get a solo show. Usually it's a twofer, and there's just a one-fer today. Me here broadcasting from my home studio in the booming metropolis of Melbourne Beach, Florida, where it is currently what we call lightning season. And I didn't know this existed until I moved to Florida about a year ago, but we have a lightning season here. So last night it was most certainly in fine form with storms a-brewing and basically nonstop lightning for hours and hours, which is kind of crazy. But anyway, that's how it goes when you live subtropically, as I do. But I spent my first 25 years in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So I know all about snow. I know all about the cold. I know all about plugging in your car. And for a lot of Americans, that's a strange thing where you actually plug in your car. Like when it's parked in front of your house, like overnight, you have to plug it in. And what that means is there's a block heater on it where the oil pan is basically heated up so the oil doesn't actually literally freeze. With synthetic oils, that's not much of a thing these days, but back in the day, you'd see this little plug, this little cord sticking out from the grill of a car in Canada. And that was so you could plug your car in so it didn't freeze solid in the wintertime, which was like a very common thing. Anyway, let's talk about data. We're here to talk about data governance. That's one of the things we're going to talk about. We're not going to be able to avoid talking about AI and language learning models and other stuff because, guys, there's a lot going on, and we'd be kind of silly to ignore it. Had some interesting posts this week regarding data fabrics, which to me is an adaptation of AI at scale within large organizations. We can talk about that, of course. Of course, we can cover any questions that you've got. Hey, Jason. Hello. Nice to see you. Thanks for all your support on LinkedIn. I appreciate all your comments on my posts, by the way. It's awesome stuff. So we can't avoid talking about AI. We really can't. Any other things that you guys want to talk about? I'm on the verge of doing a whole bunch of travel. So that's kind of cool. Maybe I'll give you a little bit of insights there. I'm on about an 8-week tour of presentations in a few different cities. So kind of looking forward to that. Travel is draining, but yeah, lots of updates to share. So let's talk about governance and what's kind of going on in the state of the world of governance. And yes, I am going to interweave AI because it's hard not to do that. But one of the most compelling things that I saw over the last week was a demo of the integration of OpenAI into a data stewardship use case. Now, the data stewardship use case could be a data quality use case, right? So let's just imagine data stewardship for now. Generally, could be in the context of MDM, could be in the context of data quality, could just be a generic data stewardship use case where you are doing data stewardship in a CRM or an ERP or in a point of data origination, right? Just manual care and feeding of data. When you think about AI, one of the kind of the easy use cases to conceptualize here, if you've been playing at all with ChatGPT, which over 100 million people have, it is amazing. I was doing some research the other day And I worked for this little internet startup called America Online for a decade, from 1995 to 2005. So I was around in the early days of the internet. Yes, this is real gray hair here, folks, by the way. I was around for the early days of the internet, and it seemed like that thing just exploded out of nowhere and that it was going like at this crazy pace. Well, the fact is that the Department of Defense actually created the early forms of the internet. And for the internet to hit 100 million users, it took 25 years. So granted, maybe the first 10 or so was DARPA, and it was, it was very much a secret project within the DoD, but there was some form of the internet, going back into the 80s, 70s and 80s for sure. But anyway, make a long story short, took 25 years for the internet to hit 100 million users. It took cell phones 10 years to hit 100 million users. Think about that. ChatGPT hit 100 million users in 60 days. That's the pace that we're talking about. And every time, the more and more stuff I'm learning, I mean, just the crazier the situation is getting. And I mean that in a good way, but also kind of maybe a terrifying way as well. But anyway, I saw this demo of OpenAI being used in a data stewardship use case. And think about data verification, right? Like data quality. We all struggle with data quality. I mean, just getting our hands around when is something accurate and when is something inaccurate. It's a difficult thing, right, for a lot of organizations. I used to work for one of the biggest kind of B2B data providers in the world down in Bradstreet. A big part of what they did was data verification, data validation, at least B2B, right? Where, how do you know when the information you're looking at Verizon is correct or not correct? So it's quite easy to conceive how you could do a plugin, right? Like a plug your data quality application or your MDM application or even your business application, your CRM or your ERP, where you could have some sort of plugin where you are type. What's the correct address for Verizon, for example? And I was watching a use case of this and I thought, okay, well, this is pretty much a layup, right? Like this should be easily done. All you need to do, I mean, they're building, OpenAI, other providers are building these plugins where you make plugins and you just hit an API and you can start asking questions and getting the answer back. Seems logical. Okay. But then things start to get a little more complicated. And I'm not saying anything that I'm about to say from the perspective of don't do it, or this is a bad idea, or we're moving too fast, or slow down. The horse is out of the barn, metaphorically speaking. We are racing towards this future that we don't really kind of fully have our arms around. It's abundantly clear to me that we don't. And this one little simple use case was massive evidence of that to me. And again, I don't mean to be negative or to sound like I'm kind of, being down on this, because I'm not. I'm a huge believer in AI. It's concurrently inspiring and concurrently terrifying. My video seemed to pause there a little while. Hopefully everything is okay. It's concurrently, invigorating and terrifying. But I'm a believer. Right? I'm an optimist at heart. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. Sometimes you could question whether that's true based on some of my rants on LinkedIn on things like data literacy and a few other topics. But I'm an optimist. So I actually believe in the power of AI. But even when you look at this one little, what may appear as a mundane data governance use case, and how AI could be used to fulfill it, which is just simple data verification, right? Well, I was watching this demo. I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. So you ask the question, and what you get back may be incomplete or may be inaccurate. And these AI models hallucinate all the time. I saw an example this week where somebody was asking who the CEO of Amazon was, and OpenAI came back with Jeff Bezos. Well, it's not Jeff Bezos. It's this guy named Andy Jassy. He's the CEO of Amazon. But that's just one example where the answer may not be correct or it could be correct. So question one is, how are you going to know? Right? How are you going to know? But I guess in theory, what you could do is, and this is the example that I saw earlier this week, is that you could really kind of start massaging, for lack of a better word, the prompt, right? Like you could add more specificity, add more granularity into the prompt that says, okay, well, what is the address of Verizon? And by address, I mean the headquarters address of Verizon, right? Like, so you could in theory iterate on the prompt to make sure it got to the point where the answer was correct. And if you think about that, I mean, okay, that's not totally inconsistent with how we've ever done this, right? Every data quality rule, every MDM rule, you had to kind of, it starts with a data governance policy. So yes, this is about data governance. It starts with a policy. Somebody somewhere determines a policy. Generally, that's some form of a data governance committee, right? Where we are deciding on the completeness, timeliness, accuracy, uniqueness of data. And then those rules get configured into maybe an ETL process, maybe an MDM platform, maybe a piece of data quality software. Sometimes those rules are coded by an engineer, right? Where an engineer would be sitting between the policy and the actual implementation of the rule. Sometimes those rules would be partially coded by maybe a data administrator, maybe a data steward, and maybe partially supported by some sort of third-party software, like data quality software, or MDM software, or some algorithm sitting in one of those systems. Maybe there's even some call out to a third-party data provider, like my ex-employer down in Bradstreet. But to make a long story short, this idea of kind of configuring rules, I mean, it's not entirely foreign, but how it's done is totally different, right? Where you are sitting there prompting, and where you could potentially have some sort of sandbox where you are going kind of back and forth and issuing prompts, and where you are kind of sculpting the rules or configuring the rules or testing the rules, right? This is a common thing in data quality and MDM, where you are iteratively testing rules to see if the output of the rule is consistent and accurate. But it's a very, very different thing, right? To have, in this case, it was a data steward supporting an MDM use case, where basically that data steward has gone from managing exceptions to the rules that have been configured and codified by somebody else to actually configuring the rule, right? So this is fundamentally different, right? And you could have conceivably a data steward or a data administrator now all of a sudden being what they're calling a prompt engineer. And if you put aside how do you know when it's accurate, which is still an issue today, by the way, right? In theory, you had specificity in the rule where you could determine, all right, there needs to be this number of characters, it needs to be in this format, and in theory, you could, you don't know whether it's accurate or inaccurate. That would hold whether it was inside an AI model or outside an AI model. But getting around that, my point being here is that for kind of data managers, jobs are going to change, right? So that's one thing, right? And kind of the job of data stewardship, I could see is significantly changing if you assume that as a part of a validation process or a verification process, you're using AI to help do that. So this notion of prompt engineering, I don't know if that's going to persist. Maybe it will. I have to conceive that in the future that vendors will start, instead of end users being the prompt engineer, right? I kind of liken this to early days of the internet, where it's like you had to be very granular and very specific about the things that you asked for, right? And if it took some time for vendors and providers of software to take kind of like layer one types of instructions that were required, and those instructions started to be abstracted out into second layers where software was responsible for that. So I think everybody's talking about prompt engineers. It's like, well, wait a minute. Well, why? That seems like rubbing two sticks together to get fire. When couldn't software actually itself be used to do that, and the iteration back and forth? Couldn't AI actually be used to do that? Well, that's kind of a fractal, right? AI configuring AI. Okay, my mind is spinning. But anyway, to make a long story short, maybe data stewards in the short term become prompt engineers. I don't know what that means. But what I saw was, in many ways, a fundamental change to data stewardship, a fundamental change to data management. What I also saw was, you could rightfully ask the question, is this taking more time than it otherwise would take. I think if you jump out and do Google searches to try to verify the address for Verizon, it'd probably end up taking about the same amount of time. So I don't know whether there's an efficiency change here or not. But I do know that how these things are done, data stewardship is essentially an exception management process to more of a rule configuration process. I think there's something fundamentally different there. The other thing that was fundamentally different to me was the behavior of the rules. Meaning today, if you configure a data quality rule or an MDM rule or an ETL process or whatever it is, right? Once those things are configured, the behavior of the rule, in theory, knock, knock, should always be the same. Should always be the same, right? You would always expect the behavior of the rule to be consistent. And if it stopped, well, then maybe there's a problem in your code or something went amok. But in a world where the rule is managed by AI that could possibly change, is that problematic? Or maybe I'm making too much of an issue out of this, meaning, in theory, if you had a record today that passed a data quality rule, and tomorrow maybe the training data set changed or something changed on the AI side that you didn't know about, or was immaterial, or it just happened, right? The training data set was fundamentally altered, and then all of a sudden that record that passed a data quality check now failed one. Is that problematic? Right? Because your rule didn't change. The underlying data set that is used to generate the rule or support the rule or enforce the rule actually changed. Is that problematic? Maybe it's not if you can explain it, right? And for me in my career in data management and in data governance and in MDM, what I call defensibility, which is another way of saying explainability, is almost half the battle. Right? Like, your users want to know why they're seeing what they're seeing. They want to know why do I see Acme Incorporated here? Yesterday I saw Acme LLC. Now I'm seeing Acme Incorporated and the address is slightly different. Why? Right? Like, explainability in our world, in the data management world, has always been an issue. It's always been there. And we've always needed to be able to explain our rules. Half of that battle is where we engage business stakeholders, engage business users to create the rules, to help us create the rules. Right? So that, well, hey man, you were there, you were at the table, you know what the rule is, and you should be able to explain it. But if you can't explain it and you can't explain what you're seeing, well, that undercuts the trust that we need as data management professionals, as MDM people, as data quality people, as CDOs. If you erode that trust, well, then you got a problem. You got a real problem. So this does dovetail back to the idea of kind of explainable AI, and how do we explain when things change? Because I think we're going to need to. So it's me, guys. I take a long time to explain anything because I was a Gartner analyst. I got paid by the word. That's a joke. But this is my long-winded way of saying, for what would otherwise appear as a really mundane use case. And please, for any data stewards out there, I don't mean this to be, I'm not saying this in a negative way, but what would appear a mundane use case, meaning asking a language learning model, where is the headquarters of Verizon? That seems rather mundane. It seems like something that it could do really, really well. To me, in my mind, at the very least, that opens the door to some pretty fundamental questions about, how do you optimize the behavior of the system? Who does that? What are the impacts on the roles of data stewards or other data administrators or data engineers, where those data engineers historically maybe would have codified some of those rules and ETL processes now that are existing somewhere else, where it's not the engineer doing it anymore. It's somebody in a CRM maybe doing it because they've baked in an API call out to some language learning model to start doing some of this stuff. So what appears otherwise mundane, I think there are some questions that we don't really kind of have the answers to yet. And this is one of the things I've seen over the last couple of weeks with just kind of AI in general, is like, things are moving so fast. Getting back to my quip about the internet. It seems like we're now at the point where, like, metaphorically speaking, because I like metaphors, The doors are open on the barn. Horses are running out, and the humans are running after, trying to kind of chase the horse, right? And maybe we'll catch it. And if we do, it's just going to be this wild, crazy, exciting ride, the ride of our lives. But if we don't, are we ever going to, kind of be fully playing catch up? And I'm already seeing this in my world, right? Like there isn't, trust me on this one, guys, there isn't a provider of data management software out there who isn't having fire drill meetings right now about how to integrate AI into their platforms. And if you don't do it, and if you're kind of sitting back and saying, hey, we're going to figure this all out, well, then you're going to be late to the game, right? And arguably, maybe in some ways, we are. I don't think you are. Like if you make data quality software, I think you should be methodical, or MDM software. I think you should be methodical about this stuff and be able to answer some of these questions, right? And be able to answer, why are you seeing what you're seeing? This is fundamental to trust with your user base. But at the same time, there is a little bit of an arms race going on here, and everybody's racing towards something, whatever it is. And I don't think we have any idea what it all means or how it's going to impact us, is how it's going to impact our jobs as chief data officers, or as data stewards, or as the chairperson of a data governance committee, right? Will we even get to a point where we are automating data governance? I've made a lot of posts on LinkedIn, speaking about this in the context of the data fabric, which I'm now a believer, by the way. But I've made some indirect posts about kind of the robots taking over it. And honestly, the reaction has been kind of vitriolic, not by everybody, but by many, right? Which is like, hey, the robots aren't taking over. This is silly. Why would we even do this? It's a little dire. But where we're going, right? And what I mean by we is not data management community. I mean business, right? So all this stuff is going to happen, not because the tech is cool, and the tech is cool, but this stuff is going to happen because businesses are fundamentally changing, right? The digital transformation is very, very real. Yes, it sounds a little pithy. It sounds a little headliney, clickbaity. What does that even mean? Like, okay, come on. It's real. I saw it when I was at Gartner firsthand, right? I saw, starting in 2020, when things started to go sideways because of the pandemic, when buyer behaviors changed overnight, when the availability and security of a supply chain stopped, right? When there was an entirely and completely new normal being defined right before our eyes, people working from home, you were there. The list of the way that things changed was fundamental. It was amazing. And what I saw was companies were like, we got to figure this stuff out. We need to be able to respond faster. There is a new normal, and that new normal is disruption. Whether it's war in Europe, whether it's lack of access to reliable energy sources in Europe as a result of the war, or it's supply chain shocks, or whether it's massive demographic shifts happening across the planet, again, right before our very eyes, on and on and on. We live in a world of disruption. So businesses are figuring out, we need to be able to respond faster than we've ever responded before. Some businesses are actually figuring this out. The use case that I like to give is Nike. It's a great one, because like Nike, literally almost overnight, not literally, but in the span of 2 to 3 years, which is in business terms is like fast, has gone from 10% of its sales being direct to consumer to this year, I believe they'll be pushing 50% of the sales direct to consumer, like meaning cutting out the middle of their value chain, like cutting out big box stores and cutting out retail stores, right? And where it's like Nike.com and Nike shops and Nike branded experiences. Like that's a fundamental shift in how businesses operate, right? That's just one example. There are plenty of examples here. I lost track of how many manufacturing companies I talked to when I was at Gartner who were all trying to pivot towards more direct to consumer models, right? Who were manufacturing, whatever, it doesn't matter. Walk down the aisle of a Home Depot, pick any aisle, doesn't matter. Walk down the aisle and I will guarantee you that people who are making the stuff on that shelf are all trying to figure out how to develop a relationship with you, a direct relationship with you. Again, another example of the way that businesses are fundamentally pivoting, right? Talk about IoT, right? Which is not something we've actually been talking about in the data management world very, very much, right? Yeah, we talk about it from the perspective of spinning up a lake or a swamp or a warehouse or whatever. Generally going to be more of a lake when you're talking IoT, really unstructured or variable structure and all sorts of the data. But throw all these things together, right? Disruption, change, pace of business, wildly kind of dynamic paradigms when it comes to consumer behaviors that can change really, really quickly. Put all these things together, and businesses are like, we got to figure this stuff out. And sitting at the beating heart of all of this is data, right? And yes, we need to become more data driven. I would argue we need to become more customer driven. But what this all means is that businesses have figured out they need to be able to respond quickly. They need to be able to scale. They've moved to the cloud, or they're in the process of moving to the cloud, and they look and they see data as far as the eye can see. And they know that data is both a gold mine from an analytics and insight perspective in helping fuel better decisions and helping build better models and helping you be more predictive instead of reactive. So from an analytics perspective, there's a ton of data there. But from an operations perspective, there's a ton of data there as well. So companies see this. And by the way, a lot of that data was just kind of sitting fallow or unrealized, where the value of it is just, we never really even bothered looking at it because we never really had the scalability and flexibility that we have now, right? A lot of the limitations that were there from a compute and store perspective when we were all on-prem, it's gone. It's gone. And now companies are like, okay, if I can find a way to operationalize that data or analyze that data, I'm going to have a competitive difference. I'm going to be doing things bigger, faster, stronger. So it's not that the tech is cool. It's not. And it's not that AI is cool. The business is driving us here because the business needs scale. The business needs flexibility. The business needs adaptability. It's what it needs. I would argue this is really kind of the value story around the data mesh. It's not necessarily that, centralization is bad, because it's not. Hubs exist for a reason, right? Whether you want to talk about airlines or whether you want to talk about data architectures, hubs exist for a reason, and not all hubs are bad. But the idea of decentralization is really good because it allows the flexibility that businesses need, right? So the businesses need these things. Our business stakeholders need adaptability, flexibility, scalability, centralization and decentralization, rationalized based off of use case. And it needs all these things. And lo and behold, AI, poof, here it is, and it helps all those things. So, the example that I gave, I think it was last month's CDO Matters Live, when I was kind of talking about my experience at the Gartner Summit, and Gartner basically saying, hey, slow down on AI. And they were drawing a comparison to between AI and Hadoop. And I was like, there's no way these even compare, right? Like Hadoop, companies that spend a lot on Hadoop are still looking for a use case, right? They're still looking for a business justification in many ways, other than getting rid of kind of, proprietary server infrastructures and expensive Oracle licenses. A lot of companies are still looking to justify their investment in Hadoop. Meanwhile, ChatGPT is being used by teenagers to do homework. So there's value there. There's a value prop there. Real problems are going to be solved. They're already being solved. So the business is going to run to this stuff, right? And if we don't provide it as data practitioners, as CDOs, as VPs of data and analytics, if we're not leading the charge on this, functional leaders are going to do it on their own, right? They're going to find ways to plug Salesforce into OpenAI if they already haven't done it. Right? They're going to find a way to integrate their ERP processes or any other process. They're going to find a way to do this and to integrate AI into how they work day in and day out, because it's because of the scalability, because of the flexibility, because all the things that I was talking about before. So the horses are running out of the barn. We're chasing after them. And I'm not here to say stop running. I'm not here to say don't do it. We have to, because the businesses expect it and need it. And arguably, if we don't, we'll be left behind and we'll be less relevant, which is exactly the opposite of what I want. What I want and why I'm doing this and why I exist from a professional perspective is to help CDOs and data leaders get ahead of things and plan for things and succeed and increase their tenures and get paid more. So this is me saying, though, at the same time, I haven't figured this stuff out at all. Like, hey, let's use AI for checking data quality. That seems easy. Oh, maybe it's not. Yikes. Right? Like, hey, let's use AI to automate our governance policies. Well, what does that mean? Right? Like, and wow. Okay, maybe we can, right? Should we? I don't know. What about ethics? What about explainability? Like, what about the fact that these models only exist as a function of the English language? That's kind of being a little presumptuous, right? And based off of, a predominantly, English speaking kind of cultural dynamic, right? Like that, maybe that's problematic, probably, right? Like just all these things, it's just like it makes my head want to explode, which is a good thing, right? Like my friends, these are interesting times. And there's no place I would rather be than right here and right now and trying to help people figure this stuff out. And maybe, hopefully you feel the same way. I feel more invigorated than I ever have before. Like, let's be honest, like data quality, MDM, integration, right? Like, but hey, data's sexy again. Baby. I don't know. I am excited because there's a lot going on. And if it's not the data and analytics organization of companies figuring this stuff out, yeah, then we're going to have a problem. Then we're playing catch up to the technology. We're playing catch up to other people in our business, and that's a position we don't want to be in. We want to lead on this one if we can, even though we may be chasing wildly after some technology. So anyway, oh, I was looking at the wrong tab. Toronto. Natalie, hey, sorry, I'm just catching up off my original rant. Hello from Toronto. The Leafs, maybe it's this year. Maybe, but I got bad news. I'm an Edmonton Oilers fan, and hey, I'm old. I got to see Yari Curry and Mark Messier and Wayne Gretzky and Paul Coffey played together. And what I see with the Oilers right now, it is eerily reminiscent of those days. So Natalie, greetings. Glad you could make it. Hello from Toronto, the Big Smoke. I'm hoping for an Oilers Leafs final. Wouldn't that be awesome? All Canada. Sorry for any Bruins fans out there, and I know there's a lot of them, and the Bruins are just like in fuego. Yorkshire. Johnny, there is a disproportionate number of people in Yorkshire in my life, and I don't know why. It's interesting. I'm a hobbyist photographer, as some of you may know. My camera's not here. I'm a hobbyist photographer, and if you're on Instagram, Photo Hawker. But I've been having it kind of sit a little fallow for a while because I had other priorities. But I'm on Instagram, Photo Hawker. That's my handle, and in the photography world, there's like this disproportionate number of landscape photographers. That's my jam, landscape photography, from Yorkshire. I don't know why. Like, it just seems like, and every time I turn on YouTube, there's some other YouTube video coming from the Yorkshire Dales or from the Lake District or from the Peak District. And it's all of this great photography coming out of the north of UK. So I don't know why, but Johnny, I'm glad you could be here. Well, hi, Sam from Austin, Texas. I think I know you. My old home. Paul, so nice you could join from Rotterdam. Wonderful. Such an awesome city. I actually did business in Rotterdam. I was doing business there for a week, but I actually stayed in Amsterdam. But the train system in the Netherlands is so good and so on time and so efficient. You can actually do that, where you can commute about 50 minutes from Amsterdam to Rotterdam and just work in Rotterdam and still live in Amsterdam. It's crazy. Rule changes. I thought if a rule changes, you should be in a QA environment, only go to prod once the data stewardship approves it. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, that's how it should work. Yes. My concern, though, is not necessarily a change in the rule as you know the rule, but a change in the behavior of the AI, right? And again, maybe something major changes in the training data set or something changes in the AI that you can't explain or you don't know about. Haley with the Bruins. Yeah. Okay. What's this spinning around in the little video? Okay, that's fun. Lee Bruins. Sam Bruins. Hello, Lee. Netherlands, basically one big suburb. Well, I don't know, but there's a lot going on in the Netherlands. Such a wonderful place to visit. The airport in Amsterdam is interesting. It's like, am I in a mall or am I in an airport? Answer yes. That shithole. It's like, yeah, as are a lot of international, major international airports are, there's a lot of retail going on. But anyway, let me look at my notes to see if there's other things that I wanted to talk about. Oh, data fabric. Yes, I've waxed on about the data fabric already a little bit. I'll be honest, guys, and say I was not a believer. I mean, I was a believer conceptually. I was a believer about 6 months ago, but I was like, my biggest challenge with the data fabric was how is the CDO going to get his or her head around this, right? And how in the world would a CDO ever be able to explain this stuff to a CEO? What in the heck does it mean to activate metadata? What's metadata? Right? Like I'm a CEO or I'm a CFO cutting the checks, and I've got a CDO coming to me to say, hey, well, we're gonna create a data fabric to activate our metadata. We're going to exploit some of the triples that exist naturally within our data, utilizing knowledge graphs to explore and understand complex relationships that will allow us to activate our metadata, that will also allow us to slap on a recommendation engine to optimize our data management processes. Like, that's just word soup. And what does that even mean? Like, really, what does that even mean? And I was asking that question. I mean, and I knew the answer rhetorically. I knew it because I was involved in helping partially create the data fabric narrative when I was at Gartner. But now, literally, we've gone from that stuff, like what's active metadata, what's a data fabric, you pick your definition, to, oh, okay, so if I can use the internet to train a model, the entire internet, by the way, not just a little corner. I mean, as I understand it, like all of it, like pre-2021, if I can use the internet pre-2021 to develop a model that basically answers questions about anything. And yes, we can have a discussion whether that it's, the hallucinations and whether it's correct answers or incorrect answers and all that. It's fine. By the way, if you have the time, if you're a fan of Lex Friedman, his podcast, there was an interview he did with Sam Altman, who was the creator of OpenAI. Totally and completely recommend that. Interesting conversation. But if we can use the internet to train our data, to train a model that answers questions about anything, we could most certainly use our own data, right? So imagine all of our data, all of it. Log data, transaction data, CRM data, ERP data, data from digital marketing, employee data, employee satisfaction, survey data, like all of it, right? Put all of our data into one big bucket, and we're already largely doing that thanks to the migration to the cloud. Could we use that to build and inform a model that allowed us to ask questions about how to best manage our data? When is data correct or incorrect? The answers here is absolutely positively yes. If you had access to all of your data and you had enough compute, you could look across your data to understand when a transaction is successful or it's unsuccessful, or when a transaction happened quickly or when a transaction happened slowly. Any transaction, maybe that's somebody buying something online, maybe that's you shipping something to somebody, maybe that is an employee being onboarded. It doesn't matter. You could easily, using AI, you could easily start to infer and derive when data was correct and when there was problems in data. This is really the underlying concept of data observability. And by the way, I don't know why, like to me, data observability is just a miniature data fabric that is focused on data pipelines, which sorry, most people outside of the data world don't care about. It's literally making the sausage, right? The data pipeline, right? Like it's the sausage making that nobody really kind of cares about outside the data and analytics world. And we've overlaid this concept of data observability, which is being able to use AI, ML graph, other modern technologies to understand where there are problems and understand exceptions and understand where there are not, to make sure that the factory, the sausage making factory keeps working at optimal efficiency. Well, you could extend that beyond the data pipeline to anything. So I don't understand why, first of all, data observability is not new. What's new are the technologies that we're using to do it. But okay, why are we talking about data observability? Because to me, it's a subset of the data fabric. Because if you can conceive a world where you're using data to understand, or using AI to understand exceptions, and where you're using AI to tell you where there are problems, where things are not working to your SLA, or things are not working to the standards of your data quality, or to anything else, to take it beyond the pipeline. That's where the real value is, frankly, right? Data pipelines break. Okay, it's no fun, particularly if you're in data and analytics, particularly if you're in operations, right? Where it's like, I almost said your pager's going off. That's how old I am, guys. I remember pagers. But where your phone is lighting up because the data pipeline breaks, you don't want to be there. I don't know who likes that. So observability sounds just fine to me. You could even build models to start predicting when things are going to break. We're already doing this. Smart cities are using AI to predict demand from people for parking spaces, right? Or for parks, or for whatever, right? Like, this is the world that we're living in. So data observability, I mean, I get it, but I really don't get it, because if you can conceive of that world, you can most certainly conceive of the data fabric world. And if you can conceive of OpenAI and how that works, then you could easily lay that into the world of data and analytics. So yeah, now I'm a believer. I think the data fabric is how AI will be operationalized at scale within most large organizations. So that's the data fabric. I think it's real. And we can get into conversations about data fabric versus data mesh. People like to do that on LinkedIn. It's an apple and an orange, right? A data mesh is an analytical construct. And anybody tells me that it's not, it's a socio-technical construct that also includes the support for operational uses of data. No, doesn't. Literally page 1 of the book, the data mesh, literally says it's an analytical construct. So that's a limit, right? I had a post about that very, very recently, about my concerns about the data mesh. And by the way, as a way of managing analytical data products, love it, particularly in highly decentralized organizations, right? So if I'm a chief marketing officer, or if I'm a chief procurement officer, and I've got my own marketing analytics group, data mesh all day. But if I'm a chief data officer and I'm responsible for optimization of cross-functional uses of data, and it's my job to run an efficient data enterprise where data can easily, data and analytical insights can easily traverse from function A to function B, I don't know what a polyseam is. And a polyseam is how this cross-functional world is largely described. And I don't know what that means. I just know that the way the customer is defined in this function is the way that is different than how customer is defined in this function. And that's a problem. And how do you resolve them? And we're back to this concept that not all centralization is bad. Try telling an airline that centralization is bad. Anyway, end rant. Got anything else going on? Any questions? Oh, thank you, Natalie from Toronto. Or as people south of the border say, Toronto. But Canadians like us say Toronto. Could you please confirm when you say OpenAI, do you refer to specific product or software type generative AI? Yeah, I'm prone to do this. It's a good question. I'm being glib and saying kind of all language learning models, I guess, which is generative AI. There's plenty of other. Maybe I should carve out a CDO Matters Live where I'm just talking about the different types of AI, right? Like AI being the kind of the catch-all, machine learning being, a type of AI, neural networks and being a type of AI, and LLMs being a type of AI that exists within neural networks, that exists within machine learning, that exists within AI. I just kind of loosely use AI for all of it. I think maybe that's reckless. I don't know. But I am really, in this case, in the use case that I was really kind of getting at earlier, Natalie, it was about generative AI for answering questions about to support data verification or data validation use cases. Right? What's the headquarters of Verizon? What is, is 123 Elm Way a legitimate address? That kind of thing, and that the language learning models and generative AI can certainly support that. Now, there's interesting conversations to be had about kind of AGI, artificial generalized intelligence, when the machines apparently can be creative and can do novel decision making. If you listen to Sam Altman and that podcast I was talking about with Sam, Lex Friedman, we're knocking at the door on that. It seems like we're really close. And if you asked Elon Musk, what he would say is, well, maybe we're already there. How do you know we're not? Right. Like if the computers had become sentient, would we even know? Right. Like that's a mind bender. The general consensus is they have not, and Sam Altman would say that they have not. But I mean, I don't know, right? Like some of the stuff that we saw with early releases of Bing and some of the behaviors there. I mean, I don't know. These are interesting times. These things I know for sure. All right, going back to my chat window here with the spinning Boston Bruins. The importance of another question. Zhangqi, I hope I said that correctly. Zhangqi, I hope. The importance of data has been long existing. Now people have all know how valuable data is. Yes, I think we now start to see the value of data. I agree. Do you think AI is going to be a tool to intensify the competition of the business or something that overhauls the industries? Yes, to both. Absolutely yes to both. It will be absolutely a competitive differentiator. But I think that there's a lot of work to be done to understand how to responsibly and constructively and productively integrate it. The example I gave earlier is like there are a lot of long tail effects here that I don't think we have any idea what they mean, right? Like what does it mean to replace copywriters and editors and creative artists with DALL-E? Like what does that mean for the society writ large? Right? What does that mean for the creative endeavor? What is it, for example, copyright? Like, are we just giving up on copyright? Like, what will be the motivation to create anything net new? Right? There are some glaring examples out there. Getty Images suing. I forget which of the AI platforms it was, but suing because their images were used without their permission. And it was pretty obvious because it had the watermark showing up on it. It's like, oh, come on. Like Getty Images being showing up. But that's one example of, I don't think we have any idea of what it really even means yet. So the answer to your question is yes, it's going to intensify competition. And yes, it's going to overhaul industries. It's going to massively transform industries, like law and accounting. Like any profession where your access to knowledge was the difference between you and anybody else. Lawyers, for example. We could get into some of the interesting, behavioral characteristics of good lawyers versus bad lawyers. But in essence, and I'm being kind of glib here, and my offense to anybody who has, lawyers in the family, but it's basically access to knowledge. Right? Like what the lawyers have access to knowledge and to a certain degree, how to get at the knowledge. They're just like really, really, really super smart librarians, right? Like who are knowledgeable in a certain area. Law, the field of law will be completely upended by AI. What does this even mean? But what does that mean? Right? Where all of a sudden you're getting quasi legal advice from a machine? Like, can that even be possible? Right? What happens if you get advice from a machine and you take, advice based on that, right? Like, and you take action based on that. I don't think we have any idea of what the ramifications here are going to be. The same is true in the data management world, right? We got a lot to figure out here. We have got a lot to figure out here. So it's going to transform industries. It most certainly will have to, and it's already begun. But getting back to copyright, sorry, I knew that there was a thread there that I'd kind of lost track of. Like, what will be the motivation for anybody to create a unique work? Maybe a new novel, maybe a white paper about data quality, right? Maybe some sort of research paper on how to best manage data. Who knows, right? What's the motivation going to be if you know that that's going to be sucked into some training set where it's very likely that what you thought was novel is no longer novel. What you thought were your ideas are now being repurposed by this machine. I could swear, guys, I could swear. Now, maybe this is just my ego because that's bias and I got plenty of it. I could swear that some of the stuff that I see, when I've asked ChatGPT, like for best practices on data management, best practices on MDM, like, how do I optimize the value of my investments in MDM and how do I get an MDM program off the ground? If you ask some of these questions, I could swear some of the stuff I'm reading was written by me. Now, again, maybe that's my bias. It probably is, but if you make a living off of that, which I kind of do, if you make a living off of that, if you're an artist or a writer, what's your motivation going to be, right? Like maybe some of the rewards would just be intrinsic. Maybe you enjoy writing, maybe you enjoy painting, but that's not going to pay the mortgage. So, yeesh, I don't know. Interesting days and times. You're welcome, Natalie. And Jingxi, I hope I answered your question. Yes, the value of data is huge, but we're still trying to figure things out. I'm mesmerized by the spinning Boston Bruins meme. There should be some sort of penalty for that. If it's a penalty in football to do the icky shuffle, and yes, another sign of my age, you can Google that one, the icky shuffle. If it's a penalty to do that, it's probably a penalty for what they're doing right there. Like that's. Okay. Well, that looks like it may be in warm up. Okay, that probably isn't actually in game. I don't know. If that's during a game, that's just 2 minutes. 2 minutes for unsportsmanlike conduct. Number 47 of the Bruins. Can't read his name. Anyway, so yeah. What else? Oh, hey. So I have got a lot of presentations coming up. I'd mentioned earlier that I will be hitting the road. CDO Matters and CDO Matters Live. We're hitting the road. I'm not without my wingman that I had for several years, Mr. Scott Taylor, who is like the best road trip buddy ever. If you get a chance to travel with Scott Taylor or even to go see him, please do. He's brilliant. He's wonderful. I'm hitting the road. So the first week of May, it's actually technically the second week, 9th, 10th. I'll be in London at the IRM Data Governance and MDM conference. I'm giving the MDM keynote where I will be talking about the future of MDM. A lot of the stuff that I talked about today, I will touch on, but a lot of other stuff that I haven't touched on, I'll be touching on. There'll be a lot of touching of things in the presentation, but it will be about the future of MDM. Spoiler alert, I'm optimistic. I think there are really, really exciting days ahead. I'll leave you with one of the many, many insights in my presentation. Sustainability and how MDM will enable a sustainable organization. We've got, folks, how much time do we have? I should be mindful and not go on too long of a rant. We got a data hoarding problem. So we should talk some time about our data hoarding problem because we got one. Depending on who's doing the estimating, and there's a few different studies that have been done on this, but anywhere of upwards of 70% of data sitting in data centers is fallow, also known as dark, just sitting there collecting dust. It's because we hoard data and we got a real problem with it. Also, recently, I read some data, a report that suggested that the data center industry, right? So all these data centers all over the planet, and just take a flight to Washington Dulles. You'll see what I mean. And you'll look down. Oh, what's that? Football field after football field after football field after football field after football field of data centers, aka Amazon East, aka Ashburn, Virginia. And that's just one. Like, go to Santa Clara. Like, yeah, just as big. It's estimated that data centers produce more greenhouse gases than the airline industry. Chew on that. We got data sitting in data centers, taking storage, taking compute that's never used, won't be used, has never been used, will never be used. And the data centers are spitting out a lot of greenhouse gas because they consume a ton of energy. If you've ever been in a data center, and I have many times because I used to run an IT organization, first of all, they're like 50 degrees. So because if they weren't, the rack upon rack upon rack upon rack upon rack that are all computers, basically, that are all spitting out a lot of heat, they'd overheat, the whole thing would melt down, and we'd have a problem. So they consume a ton of energy to keep them cool. So think about that. We got a data hoarding problem. How could MDM be used to solve a data hoarding problem? Well, think about this. If MDM is built to break silos within an organization, which it is, could MDM be used to break silos that exist across companies? Spoiler alert, yes, it could. So that's one of the examples of the things I'll be talking about at this conference in London. I'm stoked to be going back to London for the first time in about 4 years. Thank you, COVID. One of my favorite cities on the planet. 2 weeks after that, I will be returning to London to attend the Gartner Data and Analytics Summit in London. That'll be awesome because it's a Gartner event and I'll get to see some of my old friends and we'll talk about data. First week of June, or it's the second week. Sorry, I keep saying it's the first when it's actually the second. Second week of June, I'll be in San Diego at the Data Governance Information Quality event hosted by my friends at Dataversity, where I will be speaking. I'm not sure what I'm speaking on, but I'm speaking there. So that'll be awesome. Third week of June, I'm on a road trip here in the US. And then the first week of July, I will be at the CDO IQ conference in Boston, speaking there. Awesome conference. If you're a CDO, want to be CDO or director of data and analytics, you really need to think about going to CDO IQ. It's just a fantastic conference. In September, I will be speaking at Enterprise Data World. Anytime there's world in something, I want to say it in a big echoey voice. That'll be in LA, third week of September. So my hope is that we can connect, do a meetup thing at one of those events. And hopefully maybe you live in London, maybe you live in LA, maybe you're going to DGIQ in San Diego. That if you do, I'd love to meet you. So we can have a chat about stuff. Just a couple of minutes left. I want to make sure we tie off on any questions. Oh, Natalie, should we start adding human-made versus AI-made and maybe? Oh, what a good question. But how do we know? But I like the idea, right? Like this is legit. This is human-made. This gets into the idea of AI regulation, right? Like I'm a pretty small government person, but when you got people like Elon Musk saying we need regulation, maybe we should be listening, right? And there are others that are saying, an ex-coworker of mine from AOL, Chamath Palihapitiya, who's on the All In podcast, which I strongly recommend, by the way. He's for AI regulation. So maybe a part of that is identification of human versus machine made stuff. That's a good idea, Natalie. I like that. But that would require some sort of regulation because I don't think the machines are going to agree to that on their own. We need to bring them to the table and collaborate with the machines. I'm being silly, of course. All right, guys, we are at the end of another CDO Matters Live. I hope you found this insightful, maybe a little bit entertaining. If we want to talk about hockey more next time, in another month, I'll know if my beloved Oilers have advanced, and I think they will. And sorry, I prefer an Oiler Leaf final instead of an Oiler Bruin final. But after watching that meme, maybe, I don't know, maybe I want to beat him just for that. But thank you so much for attending. I hope you got some value from this. Please connect with me on LinkedIn if you have not already. There's only 3 Malcolm Hawkers on the planet, and chances we're in the same world, so I'll probably come to the top of the list. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Please see other episodes of CDO Matters live on your podcast provider of choice. I've got blogs on Profisee.com. I've got white papers, you name it. I'm here to help. Thank you for attending, and we will see you on the next installment sometime soon. Thanks all.